Greetings and welcome to this month's FMCA feature, where we will learn from subject matter experts on topics important to the municipal communicators in the Sunshine State. We have with us today Catherine Card, Public Information Manager with the City of Destin and Chair of FMCA's Professional Development Committee, as well as Patrick Maddox, the Director of Public Safety for Okaloosa County. Thank you both for joining me today for this follow-up conversation.
Happy to be here, Cara. Thanks so much for having us.
All right, so first, Catherine, will you kind of take us back to when Director Maddox assumed the role of Director of Public Safety and how you all started to form that professional relationship?
Sure. We found out that a new chief for public safety was hired on, and it was the lucky now Director Patrick Maddox. So when I had found out about that, I had talked with my city manager and deputy city manager and said, hey, now is probably a good time to meet the new guy. And because obviously he's going to be, probably our point of contact in the event, we've got a critical situation that happens within our county specific to Destin, any future, weather events like hurricanes. So that was something that I had reached out to Director Maddox's staff to see if there was an opportunity for us to meet. And it was a very worthwhile meeting because we were able to pull in the sheriff's office also has a partnership with the city and a contract. We don't have our own police department, so it's contracted through the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office. So we had reached out to the captain, who's the point for the city of Destin, as well as the chief for the Destin Fire Control District. So we were able to get all of the leaders in one room, sit down, talk with then Chief Maddox, his staff, and just basically getting to know each other, putting the name with the face, because it's always important to, know everybody before an incident happens, as opposed to trying to figure out who was who and coordinating efforts during the time of a crisis. So, and Chief Maddox, Director Maddox had graciously agreed, and I think it turned out to be a really good, worthwhile meeting.
Director Maddox, do you have anything to add or anything specifically that stood out, if you can recall, about that meeting?
Sure. I know that when I came into my role, there had been some previous challenges with the administration before mine. And I think what was critical to making everybody feel good and look towards points in the future rather than focusing on the past is to make sure that we understood and managed expectations for each other's agencies. So what was very important for me was to meet with the leadership of Destin and say, okay, what are your needs? What have we not done a fantastic job of in the past? And how can I fill that need in the future? And I think that was critical because there were certainly, there were some misunderstandings on both sides. There were some maybe changes in processes and personnel that was more beneficial to be brought to light very early. And just like with any board, city commissioners change, city board members change, county commissioners change. So as those things happen, sometimes administrative goals change or the flavor of the organization changes a little. So it's important to get a current snapshot and a very accurate picture of what that looks like with the current players so that the agency goals, the city goals, the organizational goals are executed most efficiently with the current role players that we have.
What I can tell you is that Director Maddox has been an absolute godsend. His leadership for the county, just to kind of parlay off of what he had said, because communication wasn't always good. Sometimes Destin felt like we were on an island by ourselves because we just weren't really getting the information. And Director Maddox has absolutely turned that on its head because he communicates very well. Again, he was sending, emails this morning about, some developments out there in the water and just always, keeping us up to speed on things. We have his work cell number. We have his office cell number. I mean, he communicates with us. He'll send me a text message. We had an incident, where we had a local store that was on fire. He was one of the first people that called me to say, hey, I want you to know that this is going on. So it's not so much having meetings, because I think we get pretty meetinged out, but knowing that we're able to respond and pick up that phone and call each other, that we've got that type of a relationship where we're able to do that.
I'm sorry, Director Maddox, did you have anything to add? Because that kind of dovetails into the next question.
I mean, that's very, very well said. And I think, you know, the more that you form those relationships during blue skies, the less formal meeting has to take place. So,
Mhm.
you know, the big formal changes, of course, when you have a change in the city commission, which happens at regular intervals, or when you have elections that take place to replace county commissioners, again, those are timed in regular intervals. But the smaller acute things, those the meeting frequency on that is based on the comfort level you have with the players that are involved. So, you know, Kat knows that if my phone is showing up on her phone, there's something that she needs
Mhm.
to get to, and she's going to get me back right away. Or, you know, if I see her phone number, something's cooking and I need to get to it. So because we have that relationship during blue skies, when things are going on, we have that comfort level with each other that we understand something is a priority and it needs to be made a priority.
Yep.
And so that brings me to the next question about communication frequency. So how are you, Director Maddox, determining at what point do you need to bring in those city partners?
And that's an excellent question. First off, like I mentioned in our previous meeting, it can't be that the only time they see my face is when the county's on fire. You know, there has to be something more frequent than that to form those relationships and maintain those relationships. So, you know, every now and then it might just be a silly text to Kat, or so, you know, something that we noticed, or something to make her chuckle, so that it's not just Director Maddox and PIO card, you know, that it's
Sure.
Pat and Kat sometimes. So, you know, that's important too, yeah, Pat and Kat, kind of funny, right?
Like that. That's great.
I
That's
see a,
catchy.
I see a meme in our future on that one. That might be good. But you know, so that's very important, so that we have that relationship and that understanding, because at some point things are going to get tense where we've both been up for, you know, 72 hours straight, the county's on fire, and we're going to have to make heavy decisions. So we have to respect each other personally and professionally, so that when those times get tense, you know, we can look at each other and get a good understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. Um, but as far as professional frequencies, sometimes, you know, we communicate so closely now, and our relationship is so close now professionally, that we probably communicate at least once a week, if not every 2 weeks, just on regular current events that are going on. And of course, if there's anything that's incredibly important, it might be several times a day. You know, like for things that are going on right now in Destin, where we have a particularly contentious issue with tourism helicopters. If we have something that is really, really hot on an issue like that, and something happens in either of our worlds which may affect that, it happens to affect both of our governments simultaneously. So we would speak to each other and say, hey, this just popped up on my radar. Make sure your folks know. I'll make sure my folks know. And that way, when they talk at the levels above ours, everybody's well informed. So the frequency of our communication just depends on what the temperature is in the county and the city at the time and what's going on.
And I believe she mentioned that uh, uh, there might be some tropical activity going on. So how do you determine, okay, yeah, this might be something I should go ahead and put on the city's radar? Or do you kind of, you know, do you watch it and not to over alarm, you know, them? How do you make that decision?
Sure. So what I look for is, I'm pretty well versed in the weather aspect, and different times of the year, there will be storm systems developing in different parts of the Atlantic and or the Gulf and Bay of Campeche. So having that comfort level with that information, I watch it and I begin to put out information if it becomes something that we're going to monitor on a regular basis. If there's just a wave that pokes off of Africa, they're not going to get something from me. But when that development area starts pointing towards Florida and the conditions ahead of that system suggest further development, that's when I start putting out information to a tremendous list of stakeholders. I have a weather list, a critical infrastructure list, a fire command list, a communications list, a municipal list, a local directors list, a state watch point notification list. And I keep those all active on my email, so that I just start typing words, you know, and it populates in my email in my to header. And that way all of those groups get it. And I customize that based on what type of message it is. So with the weather, it goes out to everybody so that everybody gets the greatest amount of time to get the updates on the system and put their own mitigation measures in place. You know, for Kat briefing her municipal government, they're going to watch that kind of like we will,
Mhm.
and wait until there is, information that suggests it may cause impacts in our local area. However, somebody like a critical infrastructure group, whether that be power and light or stormwater, they may begin to prep earlier because that group can actually be deployed elsewhere to neighboring regions if there's an impact, not even for us, but for another neighboring area. So they have a different timeline than we do, but I allow their leaders to make those decisions with the best information we have.
Right, right. And so you mentioned in our prep, Director Maddox, that you have a staff of PIOs with the county. And so, Catherine, I was wondering, do you interact with them, or is Director Maddox your direct point of contact?
Both. Great working relationship with the two PIOs that the county has. We usually meet every couple of weeks for lunch. So it's always good to form those relationships because especially when new people come in and out of positions, again, we want to build that rapport. There's been things that the county and the city of Destin have worked together on where the PIO and I have done videos, public service announcements. So not only we want to be on a unified front when there's a crisis or a weather event, but also the positive things that we're working on together. That's also when we need to be out there on the forefront and sharing the good news.
And that brings me to another question. And if you all want to touch on this or not, just let me know. But because sometimes it feels like in other areas of the state, there might be almost like a bit of a turf war or some, competition with the city county structure. I don't know I guess the question would be, if there is any of that, how do you push against it and show that, you're all working for the good of the residents of the area?
Sure. Do you want to take that on, Pat?
Sure, I'll take a stab at the beginning of that one.
Okay.
No matter which county or city you work for, obviously the municipalities fall within the umbrella of the county. And I'm sure, different political flavors of different times, there can always be tension when it comes to things like that, whether it's allocation of resources and money that comes from the state or different programs, especially COVID, which would be, written to be given to certain agencies and dispersed through other agencies yet again, and whether or not those allocations are made fairly and equally. And to be honest, in Okaloosa County, there's very, very little of that compared to other areas of the state. And the reason I can say that is because, we're on those conference calls with the other 67 counties, sometimes the other 66 counties, and we hear those things happen. So the way that we run it now, because of the way that our governments work together, it is really, really, there's a synergy here that just works very, very well. Not to say that conversations don't take place, of course they do. Right. But I think the way that the local governments here work with the county government, it's just phenomenal. It's a model for others to follow.
Mm-hmm. And it is fluid. And, even going through, Director Maddox had hosted a hurricane exercise. So, all those entities came together, just to kind of, get back in the swing of things that, we are in hurricane season. And the county PIO and I, pretty much have an agreement that, if something happens, obviously, if Destin's going to have an impact, I'm probably going to be at the EOC. We're going to be working together. We're going to take shifts. She'll have some other folks too. But when it comes to information and putting it all together and pushing it out, there is that partnership that if April needs me, she'll know that I'll be able to help out. And I feel the same way about April, that especially if we need to get something out, April will help share that on the county's platforms. The sheriff's office is really instrumental. And then again, it's about the partnerships. I believe being more than just colleagues, we're also friends. So that's a huge help. And Director Maddox and I have a great professional relationship, and I consider him somebody as a friend that, if I need some guidance, I feel comfortable enough to call him and just saying, hey, can I just bounce this off of you really quick just to get your input? So I think there is that relationship where it is very mutual, where there's going to be different things and different incidents that are going to happen where some of us are going to need some help, and others are going to be able to help provide that support.
Right. And so, as you mentioned, we are in hurricane season, and so getting the information out to the public, whether it's through the media or your separate social medias, there will be opportunities that a press conference or some sort of media briefing needs to take place. So can you walk me through what your thought process is and how those are executed if needed? I'll start with Director Maddox on that.
Sure. So generally what will happen is as we put that information out and the news agencies begin to key up on the fact that there might be local impacts, we will begin to get inquiries from the different news agencies asking for interviews. So we will accommodate them the best that we can. Things become very, very tight schedule-wise when we're expecting local impacts, because not only do we have the news media asking for inquiries, but I'm responsible for briefing out our executive team. Many of the city managers call me directly. The school superintendent, the deputy superintendent, the different water and sewer folks, the power folks. My phone blows up constantly. It's a nonstop telephone call from the second we think we're going to be impacted. On top of that, we have 2 phone calls per day, morning briefings and afternoon briefings with both the Florida Division of Emergency Management and the National Weather Service. So there's a tremendous amount of time gathering and digesting information and then applying it to your locale. So you have to get, okay, here's what we expect here. Here's what the storm is doing. Now here's how it applies to your individual coastline and the geography within your jurisdiction. So then once you get that, you have to put that into a digestible format for the masses and the different audiences that you're going to send it out to. Oftentimes that also involves putting out an alert message to the public in a system like Everbridge, which is the phone calls that you'll get automated on your phone with the text to speech option for what we type in for the emergency alerts. And that's just for general impact statements. If you start talking about evacuations and flood warnings and perhaps elevated wind warnings and closures of roadways, compound that 100 times. So then in between all that, you get to the media interviews. And oftentimes that is, we'll get lots of requests for it, and I'll run that through my PIO. That's one thing that's very important, is they'll contact me directly often, but it's my PIO who really has to schedule those so that April and Nick, my 2 PIOs, that they understand what the pace is and what the public is looking for, so that I just don't handle that on my own and completely leave them out of the loop. That's a partnership. So when I get a direct inquiry from a news station, I say, make sure you run this through my PIO. They will schedule the interview so that they're present and understand what that conversation was, so that the information, there's a little bit of integrity there, that the PIO hears what you say and understands the message that was conveyed, because every now and then a message will be put out publicly that didn't exactly come from the lips of the speaker and might be subject to interpretation. So it's very important for that PIO to be able to go back and say, hey, that isn't exactly what we said. Here's what we meant. It's important for this message to be relayed accurately. And the person to do that is the PIO. So we never, ever leave them out of the loop. No matter what level you're on, you always involve the PIO. And again, that pace changes based on the anxiety level of the public and their need for knowledge. And then the media will pick up on that and kind of increase their pace in wanting interviews.
Exactly.
And so are you ever, do you ever have you as the director and then the city manager, or is there collaboration there in an actual press conference, or is it usually just separate one-off interviews with the local media?
So generally, the way that works is, if it's prep work, if it's stuff that we're speaking about with an impending storm, something's out there right now, it's spinning within the cone of uncertainty, that's going to be me. That's going to be me and or my emergency management chief, Mike Schwartz, who will be out there talking about the storm, talking about expected local impacts. If we had disaster, if we had a Hurricane Michael direct impact to Okaloosa County, then there would be a need for the public to see a face other than mine. I will be there also, but you will probably hear from folks like the county administrator, maybe 1 or 2 of the commissioners, the sheriff. There would be a much larger scale press briefing if we were going to need to rally the public. Whereas if it's just for informational purposes, it will be just me. So it kind of gets scaled up and down depending on what level and what portion of the response we're dealing with.
right, the magnitude of
Sure.
whatever's taking place. Catherine, did you have anything to add to that?
Sure. No, it's all, spot on. Again, if this is something that's going to affect Destin, more than likely, our mayor will probably be up there with Director Maddox and the other, key players in that. The biggest thing is just the consistency of information. We as PIOs, if there's the number one thing is ensuring that we are putting out the same information, that we are consistent, because the last thing that we want is mass confusion to the public, because one entity is saying one thing, another entity is saying something else. So it is crucial that we're all talking and getting the information, and not only the public, but also thinking the mindset when we get busy and we're spun up, with this, say it's an incident, that we've got to ensure that also the people that we work with, our coworkers internally, that they are aware of what is going on, because they're going to be in that mindset of work mode and not really thinking about the personal aspects, how is this going to affect me, my family, etc. So with everything that Director Maddox sends out, I know our council, usually they're the ones that are also on that list. I will also send it internally to our staff, so that way every single employee within the city of Destin is aware of what's going on.
And that's so critical for you to take that information. Again, like you said, when something from Director Maddox hits your inbox, that it's something that is going to need to be shared to make sure that everyone is on one accord. So.
Sure. We hit all those platforms. At the county, I'll see the email from Director Maddox, and then shortly thereafter, I'll see April or Nick posted on their social media platforms. And then I go ahead and share it. So that way, the original source is known, so people can follow, just in case they haven't liked the county's Facebook page. Oh, this is worthwhile. This is a site that I need to know and be aware of. So that way I'm getting those notifications as well.
That some of it might even involve stuff that was going on with the beaches or the Destin lifeguards or something like that, because that's different than the county lifeguard. So we sometimes, when things like that happen, we talk about it, whether it's going to be a change in operational posture, or if there's needed equipment or things like that have been talked about at a different meeting. It might be a phone call going, hey, this might be coming your way. We might be able to position ourselves to get something different or work something a different way. Those are very important. Sometimes we might have, health emergencies that take place. We've been focusing a little bit on hurricane response today, but in reality, let's take something like the pandemic. Let's take something like COVID-19. So, Kat and I attend each other's meetings from time to time, and even sometimes their city government will ask me to come and speak at their meeting as part of the county and say, okay, give us a snapshot of what's going on. What do the hospitals look like? What do some of the availabilities look like in the ICU, or what are the current protocols coming out from CDC? Now, I put those out on emails, but sometimes it's important to have a talking head there, a face that will associate those protocols with it, makes it a little bit more real sometimes, or what the outlook is from the public safety perspective, which sometimes can be different than the outlook from the Department of Health perspective. Even though those are two different agencies in the same fight, sometimes a local government will want to hear from the public safety standpoint of that, because it is a different outlook. So that communication can be separate and apart. And I could get a phone call, saying, hey, our council is kind of concerned with this. Is there any data that you have on that I can give to them that may support, them making a decision in the future? And we've done that before, and we've collaborated on things like that in the past.
Yeah, as you were saying, I just remember that. So there was a few times where we had council meetings and they were asking very specific questions. And that was something where our city manager said, well, let's see, if we can get somebody from the county. So of course I know it was, let me send Director Maddox a text message. Hey, can you be at our next council meeting to talk about this? So, and I think resources, Sally and a few others, I know our point person, which is basically our emergency manager for the city, he'll reach out to Director Maddox, especially if there's something that we need. I know there was an area, there was like a lot of flooding, and I think he did work that through Director Maddox to be able to get that asset here to help us, because we're limited to the resources, how many pumps the city may have, and we may need more. So again, that's a very fluid relationship of being able to call for help when we need it, and it's a mutual respect.
Right. Well, the last question, again, thank you both so much for your time and candor this afternoon, is Director Maddox, you mentioned some FEMA courses that were you were recommending to our members. And so I wanted to know if you could just outline a couple of those that you really think that our members could prioritize if they're interested in this training.
Absolutely. So if we're talking about PIO specific things that are available, and these are courses that are non-seat time, meaning that you can take them through the FEMA distance learning right there in front of your computer. And these courses aren't huge investments in time. It's a little bit of time, and it's some reading and some listening and a couple of exams here and there. But the very first one that everybody would need to have, no matter what role you're in, is ICS 100, which is Introduction to Incident Command Systems. And the reason for that is that when things start to go sideways, there's a certain framework that we all work within, and that's the National Incident Management System, NIMS, or the Incident Command System, ICS. And ICS is the framework that lives within NIMS that makes us all speak the same language and take on the same roles. So that foundation of ICS 100 is critical for anybody that's going to work in a role in emergency management, especially putting out emergency information, so they understand the framework of how the information comes in and where it's coming from. As far as PIO specific stuff, there's something called IS 29, which is Public Information Officer Awareness, again, a distance learning course. There's IS 242B, which is Effective Communication, which is an excellent course, and it goes over a little bit of social science in there as well. As far as framing messaging, message content, pace, pulse, and things like that, battle rhythm. And then there's IS 2200, which is Basic Emergency Operations Center Operations. So if you are a PIO who's going to be stationed within and embedded within an emergency operations center, it's kind of important for you to understand what that battle rhythm is and how those different meetings occur. There's something that we operate off of called the planning P, and what that is it's a cycle to each operational period that allows for different meetings and different planning sessions to take place. And if you're the PIO, you may be gauging your meal breaks and or your downtime based on how that planning P operates, because at a certain time you'll be expecting information to come out that you're going to want to get out to the public based on that meeting cycle. So it's important to understand things like that and how that EOC functions so that you can optimize your time and also plan for appropriate downtime so that you have that mental break and you can stay in the fight longer.
Yeah, don't be a walking casualty. You've got to have a backup plan. So
Correct.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that on the chat and chew. So, well, thank you all so much for your time. That was all my questions, but if there is anything else, I want to leave the floor open before we close out. If there was any final thoughts that either of you had.
No, I think this was really great, and hopefully our folks will find it informative. And just to echo what Director Maddox was saying about the courses, it's really important. I think also too, when you know that this is really kind of your heart and soul of what you do, don't just stop at those PIO courses. Go beyond. I think I've taken the majority of the FEMA classes because I just want to be better at, what I'm doing, have a better understanding. So when the time comes, I feel more prepared, especially in those other classes you get into them. It's going to be a little bit more time intensive because you're actually probably going to have to physically go somewhere, be involved in tabletop exercises, and it's good practice. So, and I think that's really important of just having that experience, that training experience, so that way you can apply it to a real world scenario.
Thank you. Director Maddox, any closing thoughts?
No, well said. Any training is good training. Even if you learn what not to do, it's still good training. So, the best thing you can do is get in front of folks and do impromptu exercises like that. You know, when you go to an instructor techniques course from law enforcement, where I got my first instructor certification, they give you a complete ice-breaking exercise where you draw a subject out of a hat. And it's going to be something intentionally ridiculous that you have to get up there and do a 3-minute speech impromptu on, you know, and I got something like horses or chair legs. It was something ridiculous. So you draw this out of a hat and you walk up and you have no time to prepare. And you walk up there and turn around and see 60 eyes looking at you, and you have to speak for 3 minutes on horses. And people are going to be firing questions at you left and right. You know, it's an icebreaker so that you don't feel self-conscious when you talk about subjects that you actually do know about.
Right.
Number one, it's hysterical, and you're going to have a lot of fun with it. It's a great exercise to do with your team, and use horses, because you'd be surprised how little you know about horses, but how much everybody else does. So the questions that come out you are fantastic, and record it, because it needs to be played again at a Christmas party later, and everybody needs to get another chuckle out of it. So, you know, exercises like that, they only build character and camaraderie and allow you to understand what the rapid fire questions of the media are, but it also teaches you how to control an interview, because you're not a victim up there as a PIO. You know, you're the one that's putting out that information, and the media sometimes has to be trained on what the pace and tone of the questions that you will allow will be. And in settings like ours, it's different, you know, and you've seen some media operations out there, probably on news breaks, that have been out of control, you know, where elected officials or public officials have actually had to put the media in their place and say, okay, listen, hold on a second now. We're going to pace ourselves, number one. We're going to speak one at a time, number two. And number three, there are some subjects I can't approach right now because it's an active investigation. Or, you know, when you manage expectations like that, you begin to gain control of the interview. You're not subject to what they need. They're subject to what you are allowed to speak on. So there's a little bit of confidence building that goes with that. And the more confidence the PIO builds, the more prepared they will feel and understand that they're in control of the interview.
Yeah, and get to know your other PIOs, find out who your director MADC is for the county, or however the makeup is, and what your city's game plan is. So in the time of an emergency, you're prepared. We also have I even have my own PIO kind of OI of what the guidelines, what my job role is. And that is something that my senior leaders know. It's something that I have shared, you know, with other PIOs. So that way, and it helps because they're kind of trying to build theirs, strengthen it, because it's good to have those comparisons. If I didn't think about this, or, hey, this is really good, I want to take it and implement it into my plan. So these are just all things just to think about ahead of time.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you again so much for joining me on this endeavor. I appreciate it. And with that, I'll close us out, and